Hey everyone, welcome back to the Juan Palomino Breakthrough Podcast. I'm Jenna and I'm here with my husband Juan.
Hey everybody.
And today we're going deep into a question so many high-performing leaders wrestle with, even if they never say it out loud. Who am I when I'm not producing? This episode is for those of you who are used to doing, achieving, showing up strong. And maybe you're feeling a little lost when the doing stops.
Oh man, if you guys could see me, I have a huge smile on my face. Oh, this podcast, I mean, it really hits home for me. Why? Because Jenna, I confess, and those of you that are listening, for a long time, I didn't know how to separate who I was from what I did. That's my confession. And my identity was so tied to my work and to my role and my performance, even when I was in ministry. But when transition would come and the loss or burnout, right? Because we encounter those things and those roles were stripped away from me. I mean, I was just left wondering, like, what's left of me?
Ooh, so let's start there, Juan. Can you share a time when your identity felt shaken because you weren't producing in the way you're used to?
Producing. Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you one when I was in the business world. Again, I go back to my past and think, I had an opportunity where I went into work for a plating company. So what I did there, it was called Caltech Plating. We would plate parts so they wouldn't rust. Different types of plating for different parts, depending if it was steel or plastic, whatever it was. And it was all for airplanes. Anyways, I say that because I got an interview, I got hired. And the reason I got hired, it wasn't because I knew the product. I didn't know what I was selling, but I knew how to sell. So I got into this role as a guy that would go out and acquire, product, whether it was steel or plastic, so that these companies could come and get it dipped. Does that make sense? Get the plating done for their parts. But here I am showing up to work for 9 months. That's my confession again. And I'm in this role, but I don't know anything about what I'm selling. And so I was so disoriented. That's the word I want, whoever's, listening to this podcast. I was so disoriented because I would show up to do something, even though I didn't know what I was selling. And so that brings confusion. And what disorientation brings along with it is frustration. So here I am, I'm frustrated, I'm showing up to work and I'm not passionate about what I'm doing. I love to talk to people, so that was a skill that I had, and I knew how to sell myself, but I didn't know how to sell what I was selling. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm totally just disoriented.
You didn't know the product or the ins and outs of it.
Oh, no. So when people ask me questions, I was making up stuff on the fly. But I was trying to perform, and then add on top of that, this layer, I was trying to perform and I wasn't able to. And so add another layer of frustration. Therefore, I didn't want to go to work. I didn't look forward to going to my job. So that's an example where I could tell you where I was disoriented, I was confused, and I wasn't using my skills to my full potential. I wasn't passionate about what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can think of another time in ministry when you were working for a church and you were a campus pastor, and leadership decided to close
the campus,
but they kept you on staff because they loved you so much.
And I was a campus pastor. That's right. So here I am. I'm the head minister, leading a campus at a different city from the original main campus. And they decided to close it. And every day I was scared. Every day I was worried because I'm like, well, here I am. I'm a campus pastor of a campus, but it no longer exists, in its physical sense. Because we would actually do a setup and tear down at a movie theater. And in that movie theater, there was a presence, right? We would show up and there was a campus and we would do ministry there. We would have church, in other words, in this movie theater. And then it shuts down and everyone goes back to the main campus, which was, let's say, how long? What was it, like 20 minutes away? And I'm showing up, attending along with the 200 people that were attending this campus at another city. Now they all go back to the original campus. And they're still calling me a campus pastor when I'm like, but yeah, we don't have that campus. Now, we were doing a lot of work in that city. So don't get me wrong. We're still actively boots on the ground. But what church looked like in the sense of a Sunday, that was non-existent anymore. And so there was a lot of disorientation and a lot of, I guess, confusion, because I'm going, this doesn't look like what I thought it looked like for what it actually looked like for a season. So
yeah,
absolutely,
that's so real. And I think a lot of people are in that same place, especially after grief, betrayal, or a major life shift. We lose a role or rhythm, and with it, we lose our sense of self. I know for me, we were talking before this of I've been working since I was like 15, right? Just nonstop. And then we had our first baby together, and I had to stop and be at home with him. And for me, I felt so lost. Of course, I was at home and I was busy, with the baby and taking care of the baby, but it was such a identity shift for me of going from working,
performing at work,
right,
to now you have to perform at home.
Right. Yeah. And then if you remember, I did try to go back to work, but it was really hard for me and tried to figure that out.
Yeah. Transition is hard.
So let's talk about why productivity is so addictive, especially for high performers.
That's so good. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of high performers. I would, identify myself as a high performer as well. And here's the thread, in all of it is it works, right? Performance works. Productivity works, and it gives us affirmation. Productivity, you see results. And the cool thing about productivity is that you see progress.
Right. And so going back to my story, I'm at home.
Yeah.
And I don't see any of that, right? Because I'm like, okay, well, I changed a diaper, but
fed the baby, he's clean, gave him a bath.
The same thing every day, right?
Mundane work. So let's talk about that then. What does productivity do? It gives us a false sense of thinking that we're in control. That's what it does. But what you noticed is that over time, it becomes a numbing mechanism, because you just do it day in and day out, day in and day out. And what happens is, like, when you went from producing at a job to home, it really shook that, right? Because you're not seeing productivity, you're not seeing movement, you're not seeing cells, you're not seeing movement. And so now you go into this rhythm of day in, day out of, I just feed the baby, I just, help him not cry. What's the productivity in that? There isn't much. So here's the deal. If I'm always working, don't miss this, I don't have to feel. And so now you're at home, like your example, and now you have to feel all these emotions, right? The disorientation, you have to deal with deeper stuff from your past, because now you have time to think also. So pain pops up from the past, fear of the unknown, right? Being disoriented, and also shame. Shame of, again, you made your identity production, but now there's no production. And so now you're saying, am I helping at home? Is this part of me helping? Am I providing, helping my spouse? There's all those thoughts.
That's huge.
Right? That's huge. So what we don't talk about, though, also, because we've been in Christian spaces and in the church, is that this even gets more confusing in the church world. We think that producing for God is where we find our worth. That's a slippery slope. And the truth is that God doesn't value us for our output, for what happens on Sunday, for the amount of baptisms or for the amount of people that said yes to Jesus. I mean, praise God for that. We have been called to do that. What I'm saying is our worth
Or the
is
person
not
that
tied to that.
volunteers in every single ministry.
Yeah. And because, well, they don't know how to say no also to pastors. But again, that's another thing. That's another thing that we, setting boundaries and knowing when to say no.
Mm-hmm.
But again, our value doesn't come from our output. Right? God values us because we're His, not because we bring something to the table. You don't have to bring anything to the table. And God says, guess what, Jenna? I love you.
Yeah.
Juan, I love you the way you are.
Yeah.
Right. But He also loves us too much to leave us the way we are.
Right.
And
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. He wants us to continue to become more like His Son, Jesus.
Yeah. That's so important. And there's also a cultural layer to this because our world praises hustle, output, success.
Sure does. The grind. Are you grinding?
Right. And so it's hard to slow down when everything around you tells you to keep going.
Right.
So what are some signs that your identity might be wrapped in performance?
Great question. So here's a few that I could think of. One is if you have this underlying anxiety when you're resting and you have to always be doing something.
Do you know anyone like that? Okay, don't say their name.
Well, we're not mentioning names. What's crazy is you could be sitting there trying to enjoy a movie and then you see a cobweb to the left of the TV and you're like, I got to get up and go clean that. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So I might be a little guilty.
Oh, Lord. I'm going to be in trouble, everybody. Another one. Let's move on quickly. You only feel like you're enough when you're accomplishing something. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because my primal question is,
am I successful?
Am I successful?
Yeah.
And so for me, this one hits hard because if I'm not doing things, how am I going to be successful?
And that's why we're working on it.
Yeah.
Because you are enough.
Right.
You are enough, Jenna.
Yeah.
Even when you're not accomplishing something. Another one that's relatively up there is people struggle to receive love unless they think they've earned it. Does that make sense?
Give us an example.
So, I get good grades, therefore my mom and dad love me. I have to earn it. Mm-hmm. Or with a boss, I have to produce and, make sure the cells are up, and that's how I get attention and that person gives me love, a trophy or whatever. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right. Another one that I've recently heard was when someone asks you, who are you? And instead of saying, I am a child of God, or I am, you know who you are, you immediately go to your role. A perfect example is I get the opportunity to work with, again, a lot of people that have had executive roles or roles of leadership, former first responders like firemen, chief battalion officers, people in primary positions. And so if someone asks them on their day off, hey, what do you do? The words they use is I am. Mm. And they add their role. Mm-hmm. They add their job description. Okay, so that's a big one. So we start listing off our roles, or somebody that lists their achievements. Mm. Okay. Another one I could think of is when a person fears failure, not just because it's hard, but because it feels like the person has failed as a person.
Yeah.
So in other words, you were given an opportunity to do something and you quote unquote fail, and you think you're a failure. You make what you do or how you failed. You start a business and so you failed, or you were given an opportunity to do something in a different department of your role or your job or whatever that is. How about this? Are you ready, Jenna? As parents. All of a sudden you become a parent, and I say that all of a sudden, but you know what I mean. You get married, now you're in a different role, now you're a husband. The pressure of providing, the pressure of, being a good husband, a good spouse, the pressure of people looking at you and saying, oh, now they're married, Is their marriage successful? And when you fail, because we all do, I love what John C. Maxwell says. It's got a great book called Failing Forward. It's about learning. It's about growing. It's not who I am. I can fail and fail forward and learn from that. Obviously, as long as I don't continue to repeat the same thing over and over again, then that's called insanity if you expect a different result. But I am not a failure just because I failed at attempting or trying something. I just call it experimenting. Hey, let's experiment with this. So I've learned in my past, I think it was in my late 20s, when I'm going to try something new, I call it an experiment. Hey, I'm going to experiment with this. I got away from saying I'm going to try to, I'm just going to experiment, because an experiment, if you fail, you go, hey, we just tried it. It was an experiment. We're going to experiment with something new, even in business or in ministry. When I have a new idea and I want to do something different, I say, hey, let's try an experiment. Let's try it this way or that way and this way. And I don't make it about me. Because when it is about me and the performance and the outcome, because I'm seeking recognition, or I'm seeking love, I'm seeking to be successful, right? I'm seeking something outside of that, then it's about my identity. And so you got to learn how to separate both. And I think to give it language, like I just said, hey, let's try this experiment. Let's experiment with this. You can begin to separate the outcome from who you are and what happens.
Yeah, I think the word codependency comes to mind, because that's something that I'm currently working on, right? Is people pleasing.
Congratulations. Yeah.
And so, early in our relationship, we lived with your mom. And that was hard for me, because your mom is a busy person. She's always doing
a producer.
something, right? And so I felt the pressure, like I had to be like that.
Wow. Now you're opening up a whole can of worms. So this podcast is going in a different direction.
Well, and so what I'm getting at is like it being also a top behavior due to the pressures that other people put on you.
Modeling what's being modeled to you. And in the Hispanic culture, what I find is that if someone older than you sees you doing nothing, then you're called immediately lazy.
Yeah.
You're a bum. Get off your rear, go do something. They actively want to see you doing something. Rest is not a word, I think, in the vocabulary for Hispanic culture. That's called laziness.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not. It's okay to rest and take a day off.
Right. And you've taught me that, because you know how crazy I can get. Like, I have to do, like today, even in fact, I posted on Instagram my list of things to do, and that wasn't even half of it. Right. And I'm like, I need to get all of these things done. And you're like, why don't you just rest?
Well, the question is, do you have to get all this done? Well, again, for those producers right now, the people that love lists and need to accomplish, if you're listening to this, we're not saying that you shouldn't have a to-do list. But let me ask you this. For those of you that are listening, can you ask someone for help?
Well,
that's another big, question. Do you have to accomplish it all today? That's a great question. Does it need to be done today? Because here's another thing that I've learned. Producers, everything becomes urgent. Like, what's the urgency of you trying to accomplish this whole list today?
Right.
Can some of these things, form a triage? Does that make sense? Red, yellow, green. Green is like, I can wait 2 or 3 days for this. Yellow is, this needs to be done in the next 48 hours. Okay, great. Red, like, this is today. This needs to be done. Fabulous. So create your list and then triage it. Green, yellow, red. And if you get to the yellow, fantastic. You have till tomorrow. And the green, if you're like, dude, we can move this till, next week, then the pressure's off. But again, what we're talking about here is identity. Realizing that, am I living with this modeling behavior and worried about what people are going to think about me because I look like I'm sitting here just watching TV all day? Well, is it your rest day? Is it a Sabbath?
Mhm.
Right? For those of us that are believers in Christ, is it a Sabbath? Is it a day off where you don't have to be on top of, doing things because it's part of your identity?
Wow, that hits. And I think it's why so many people feel spiritually dry. They're working for God, but not with Him.
Mm,
So, what does it look like to rebuild identity outside of performance?
well, takes time.
Hmm.
But right now, immediately, I could say that it really starts with being before doing. That's the game changer there, right? It starts with being before doing. And in order to do that, I mean, you have to sit with God in the stillness, in the discomfort. It's going to take, for a lot of people, it takes sitting in the stillness. There's a psalm that says, "Be still and know that I am God." And in the stillness, you got to let him remind you. Let him remind you that you are loved, that you are chosen, and that you are called. Even when you're not, ready for this? Even when you're not productive,
Yeah.
even when you're not producing. See, Jesus heard, "This is my beloved son." Remember that part, right? John the Baptist baptizes, Jesus. He comes out of the water. And this is before he does anything, before he performs a miracle, before, he does all the beautiful things that we read about in the scriptures. The dove comes down and it says that the clouds parted and you hear, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased."
Mm.
Listen to those words. Let them sink in. This is my beloved son. And if you're a daughter, this is my beloved daughter in who I am well pleased. So before you do anything, before you produce, before you go and tear down that list and you feel accomplished, you are loved. You are loved, you are chosen, and you are called.
Mhm.
So we need to, again, return to that. And sometimes it's a daily thing, Jenna.
Mm.
I know it doesn't sound sexy, right? It's not sexy. You're like, well, that's it. Yes. And it's not flashy, but that's where your identity gets rebuilt. Again, where? In the quiet, in the stillness. God can meet you there.
Absolutely. That's so good. And for someone listening right now who's realizing they don't know who they are apart from what they do, what's one small step they can take today?
Pause.
Mm. Mm.
It's that simple.
What?
You go, yeah, right. It's that simple. No, seriously, just pause. Put the phone down. Turn off the podcast if you have to, and ask, who? Ready? You might want to write this down. Who am I becoming?
Mm.
Who am I apart from the roles that I fill? Who am I apart from what I do? And then you want to invite God into that moment. And in the stillness, again, you don't have to rush back to, producing productivity, to matter. You already matter. That's the reminder. That's the focus of today, is to let you know you are already seen and you matter, no matter if you do or you don't do.
Yeah. And in a world that always boasts about how busy they are,
So good.
this might be the bravest thing that someone does today, is just sitting in that space.
Mhm.
Hey, we hope this conversation met you right where you are. And if you've been in a season where your identity feels uncertain, we want you to know you're not broken. You're being rebuilt.
That's right. And also, again, your worth was never in what you produced. Your value was never on the line. Never.
Next week, we're having an honest conversation about shame, how it sneaks in after failure, sin, or suffering, and how to finally let it go. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And if this episode encouraged you, share it with someone who needs the reminder. You are more than what you do. You are deeply loved.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.